Hi there, I'm Kate Bowski and welcome to Educate with Whole Brain. This is my blog and it details my experiences with whole brain teaching, and I hope that while you're here visiting you'll find lots of tips for implementing whole brain into your own classroom. Our video today is going to be a Class Yes kind of tutorial, and before we get into that I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I am entering my 21st year of teaching. And I started in middle school. I spent 10 years there. And then I took a little bit of time off to raise my children. And during that time, I substituted at the elementary level and found that I absolutely loved elementary school. So the remainder of my career has been at the elementary level. Between my actual teaching jobs and my substituting positions, I have taught everything from kindergarten up through 10th grade. So I have a wide range of experiences in my tool chest, I guess you could say. I am a national board certified teacher, and I am also an intern for Whole Brain Teaching, as well as their assistant director for Whole Brain Certification. If you would like more information about certification, I will tell you about that at the end of this video. And I am the person that you want to send your essays to if you are going to go for those certification points. If you would like some help with your writing, I am the person to help you with that. So I discovered whole brain teaching several years ago when it was still called power teaching, and I just sort of dabbled in it at the beginning. I used the Class Yes and the rules and just the basics, and this past year was my first full year employing it full force into my classroom, and I can tell you it is a method and a technique that is going to change your teaching style forever. It is amazing what happens in your classroom when you use whole brain techniques, and we're going to talk about one of the first ones today, the Class Yes, which is the first part of the Core 4. It is probably the place to start when you are beginning your whole brain in your classroom. And let's talk about the purpose of Class Yes. Class Yes is what you use to focus the attention of your students. It is going to take them from whatever they might be doing, whether it's their morning activity or if it's an assignment that you have given them where they're working together, and it brings their attention back to you. So the things that you want to remember are A, how to do it. When you say to your students, class, they are going to respond to you, yes. And that way you know that you have their attention. When you hear that choral yes, and all of their eyes are on you, and you see that their hands are folded on their desk. That's an important piece of this. If you start to notice that your students are not giving you the full attention, or their hands might still be in their desk, which we know is a favorite place for them to be, then you might need to practice your Class Yes a little bit more. So let's talk about ways to make it effective. When you do Class Yes, you want to have your children make it snappy. And this was something that I didn't always understand when I first started it. So it might sound something like this. When you say class, you want your students immediately and very quickly to say yes. So it sounds like a very short word. Class, yes. And you want that to be very quick. And that's going to be something that you have to practice with your students at the beginning of the year or whenever you start your whole brain teaching methods. Because students are kind of led to that kind of slow pace of a traditional classroom. Whole brain classrooms are much different. They are very fast paced. They have a lot of energy going on. So when you say class, your students respond yes. Now, let's talk about how can you make that a little bit different. Saying just class and just yes gets boring after a while. Kids need to have change in order to maintain their interest. So there are a couple things that you can do to change up your Class Yes. The first thing that you can do is you can change your voice level. So you might say class in a regular tone of voice. You might say class in a low tone of voice, class. And however you say class, that's how you want your students to respond. So if you say class, your students say yes. And then you can use a high-pitched tone of voice, class. And then your students respond yes. And the very first few times that you do this, you're going to have lots and lots of giggles, and that's okay because that's what makes the classroom fun. Now, another way that you can change up your Class Yes is by changing the way that you say it. Instead of just saying it once, you might have to say it twice, class, class. And then your students will in turn immediately reply, yes, yes. And if you say it in a high-pitched voice, class, class, your students will respond, yes, yes. And they all giggle and think that's very funny. That's a good thing. As long as you have their eyes on you and their hands folded in the learning position, you know that you're ready to go and you've got their attention. Some other ways that we have been discussing on some of the Facebook pages for Whole Brain Teaching to do Class Yes are things like just changing the way it sounds. Classity class is another thing that people do. You might say it 3 times, class, 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 and you change the intonation of your voice. So if you were to do that with your students, you would say class, 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 and they would have to respond yes, yes, yes. You might do it in a very sing-song voice. You might say class, and your students would have to respond yes. So however you say it, that's the way you want your students to respond to you. Remembering that the whole purpose of this is to refocus their attention on you so that they are ready to receive the next thing that you are going to teach them. So you have to kind of think about adding some levity to your class because that keeps the energy level up. It ties into their emotions. It makes your kids happy. That's a good thing. We want to reach that limbic system, not only with the scoreboard, which we'll talk about a little bit in the future, but also with the silliness and the giggles and things like that. Makes kids happy, makes learning fun, and they enjoy school a lot more. So you have to kind of find what works for your class. You need to find, if they're very young students, they might be able to have a little bit more silliness. If they're middle and high school aged, you might have to kind of find what buttons to push with them. And you tailor it to your students and what they respond to. Don't be afraid to try new things. It's okay, you know, if you try something and it doesn't work. So if you use a few different Class Yeses and the kids just don't seem to be responding to you the way that you want, change it up a little bit. And you know, if they're older kids, maybe they need something that is a little bit more serious. Maybe they're willing to handle things that are a little bit more silly. So you have to kind of find their buttons. Now, lastly, I want to talk to you about also using content. At the beginning of the year, you want to start with your just Class Yes. As your students begin to understand how Class Yes works and how they're supposed to respond to it, you can start to throw some content at them. And this is an excellent way to get some review in there of some gnarly problems, some difficult content. So for example, I teach 3rd grade, and multiplication is a big thing in 3rd grade. So instead of saying class, class, I might say to them 7 times 8. And they would have to respond to me, 7 times 8 equals 56. And they do it just as quickly as with the Class Yes. And this is going to take some retraining because they're going to be used to saying yes to your class. So you're going to have to teach them that when you yell out a content phrase to them, they are to respond to you in a complete sentence with the answer. So I might say, what is the capital of Dover? I'm sorry, what is the capital of Delaware? And my students would respond, the capital of Delaware is Dover. So now they're not only getting practice with complete sentences, which for us elementary folks is a very important thing, but they're also getting a content review. So this is another way, especially with some older kids, and you've got that really difficult content with them and lots of facts and figures. It's a great way to get review into your lessons. And so it's accomplishing several things. In addition to the review, you're still refocusing their attention, and you're kind of drilling home those things that are important to you and are tough for kids to remember. So it's a good memory device too. So the 3 things that I want you to remember about Class Yes are A, make it snappy, because we don't want to waste any time. We want to have kids fully engaged and keep them moving. Number 2 is that you want to change the tone of your voice or the number of times that you say it or the way that you say it. And that way it doesn't get old for the kids. It's always fresh, it's always new, because remember, it's a very long year and we have to kind of keep changing things up to keep the kids' interest. And then finally, remember that you can use content to make changes to your Class Yes, especially when you have some difficult material or lots of just little nitty-gritty facts and figures that you want your kids to remember. It's a good way to get it in there for a review. So those are great, 3 great tips to remember when you're doing Class Yes. The last thing I want to explain to you is that when you're doing Class Yes, it is normal to not always get their attention on the very first time that you say class. If your kids are heavily involved in an activity, if there's lots of good conversation going on in the classroom and activity, sometimes you might have to say it more than one time. And I find myself doing this as well. I might say class, and I might only get half of the kids, let's say, responding yes. So then I'll change it up again, and I'll say class, class, and they'll say yes, yes, and then I know I've got my full class. Sometimes you might even have to do it 3 times. You do whatever it takes to get your kids back with you. Now, you can also bring your scoreboard in with this, and if you feel like you're having to say class too many times every time, you can always use your scoreboard to kind of reward or penalize for that. But that's a topic for a future video. So you have a lot to remember about Class Yes, but it is a great tool to use in getting your kids' attention, and it moves them very quickly from one activity back to your instruction. So I hope this answers a lot of your questions about Class Yes. If you would like to know more, there are several places that you can look. Of course, the WholeBrainTeaching.com website has a wealth of information on it. You can also search our forum there, and you can even put in the search term Class Yes and pull up blogs or posts on the forum that are specific to Class Yes. And then there are also a wealth of blogs out there, and you can find a master list on the forum, or you can just try searching Whole Brain Teaching blogs. We have everyone from teachers who are just beginning to use Whole Brain in their classrooms to veteran teachers that have been using it for many years. So check out those blogs. They're always chock full of ideas and very creative ways to implement and do things. And you'll get lots of ideas on how to make things really great for your classroom. If you would like some more information, you are certainly welcome to email me at katebowski@wholebrainteaching.com. You spell my last name B as in boy, O-W-S-K-I. And I will be glad to answer any questions that you might have. Remember, there's no question that is too silly. We are all in this together. It's a learning process, and together we're going to help each other out, be great teachers. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Tune in about another week for the next video on the Core 4, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Power to the teachers.